kind of talked to death about the fact that House of the Dragon Season 2 has been very divisive among fans. Don't get me wrong, some of the criticism of the show is really reaching, while some truly is very valid. For me, it comes down to two factors. There were some changes and decisions that the writers were forced into with the last minute call by HBO to reduce the season to 8 episodes. Some of these changes were thus poor because the season was being patched together with superglue. However, there are just as many issues and changes that can simply be put down to poor writing, but with the weird duality of Season 2, it's often hard to distinguish between these two. But regardless of why these choices were made, it has ultimately resulted in one thing: the events planned to end Season 2 now opening Season 3, which in theory should mean that a lot of the criticisms of the slow pace with Season 2 should not hypothetically be an issue with Season 3. Season 3 of House of the Dragon is going to have to be rapid, given the sheer amount of content it's going to have to cover, especially now we know we are only getting 4 seasons. This is going to cause a mess all on its own, given just how much needs to be done in so few episodes. And that is only considering the key events, let alone all the character development and setup that also needs to be done. Every 2 episodes, something huge is going to happen. It's kind of going to be like how HBO marketed Season 2 in the first place: all-out war. Let's not even get into how the hell they're going to make it work with the budget. All this equals one thing: a very different Season 3. In this video, we're going to take a look at the key battles and events that should make up Season 3 of House of the Dragon, and try to work out how the hell they're going to afford to produce them and fit them into the show. Now, the show was always going to have a tough time with Season 3, with how much they were already going to be stretching the budget. Having to open the season with the Battle of the Gullet and the fall at King's Landing will only compound that issue further. I believe that to save time and lower costs, the writers will merge the Gullet and the Fall into one event, with them happening simultaneously. I expect not all of the dragons will in fact take part in the Gullet like they do in the books, with maybe Seasmoke and Moondancer being involved in the assault of King's Landing instead, with Sheepstealer's role still very much in question at this stage. We know the context of the fall of King's Landing is going to be very different than in the books, with Alicent in the show part of it and allowing it to happen. I don't expect to see fighting at the gates of King's Landing or the Goldcloaks switching sides. I think simply the fall will be a few shots of the dragons around the Red Keep like the art on screen right now, with them landing in the Red Keep with Rhaena going straight to the Iron Throne. While all of this is happening, I expect the Battle of the Gullet will happen very much like it does in the books, but with less dragons to keep the cost down, with only Jace, Hugh and Ulf taking part. The issue with the Gullet isn't just the dragons aspect of it, which is costly in terms of CGI, but shooting the sea battle itself, which is a huge costly undertaking. They take twice as long to shoot, and are so much more technically harder to physically film. Even the post-production is so much more expensive, we're near on every line of dialogue having to be re-recorded in ADR. But regardless of these issues, if it's anything like the books, the Battle of the Gullet could maybe be the single best battle the show does. It has a lot of action, both on land and at sea, dragons and drama, with major character deaths that leave a hell of an impact on the story and on so many characters' narratives. There's also the land battle element to the Gullet with the Saka Driftmark. I suspect this will play a very small role, with maybe 1 or 2 cutaway shots to give an idea of what's going on. I do wonder how the Prince Aegon and Viserys elements is going to fit into this, and if they will try and fit the gay abandoned being captured with Viserys going missing, presumed dead, into the Gullet somehow. I suspect they could do, given how much story they still have to fit into Season 3. It would make sense to merge these events. There are quite a few events that I hope we see in Season 3, but the reality is, they will either be very stripped back or merged with other events. For example, early in Season 3 we should be getting the Battle of the Honeywine, which really is where Daeron Targaryen is going to be introduced into the story, saving the day on his dragon, and being knighted for his valour. It's a really cool, quite small-scale battle. While yes, it is narratively important, the fact it is quite small in scope does make it quite at risk of being cut. However, I think we should look to Season 2 of House of the Dragon and how the writers decided to show some of the other smaller scale battles, like the Honeywine. I'm of course talking about the Battle of the Burning Mill, where we saw the instigation of it and the bloody aftermath. I think House of the Dragon will choose to do something similar with the Honeywine. Maybe have a single shot of Daeron saving the day on his dragon, then cutting to the bloody aftermath with Daeron being knighted. While of course I would much rather see the full battle, practically speaking in terms of budget and fitting the battle into a packed narrative in episode 1 or 2 with the Gullet and the Fall, this approach does seem a solid compromise and the likely path they could go down. We then have the Battle of the Red Fork, which like the Honeywine is one of the smaller scale battles of the Dance of the Dragons, but an important one, given how it directly sets up the battle by the lakeshore, aka the Fishfeed. The battle is very much as the name suggests, a battle between the Lannisters and their western forces as they cross the Red Fork, being attacked by the River Lords, now loyal to Rhaena. It's an extremely chaotic battle, with the fact that Lannisters have literal lions in their ranks in the show, potentially setting up some crazy scenes. Some key players in the war die during this battle, and it shapes and sets up future events to come. It kind of sets up the battle by the lakeshore, also known as the Fishfeed, arguably the single bloodiest and horrific battle in the war. The Lannister forces are harried across the Riverlands until they are trapped on the northeastern shore of the God's Eye by the combined forces of the Riverlords and the Winter Wolves. They are massively outnumbered, and despite Harrenhal being in sight, have no chance of victory or escape. Thousands of Lannister men die, either killed by their foe or drowned in the lake as the Lannister line is pushed further and further back. It really is horrific. I know some fans are worried the Fishfeed is going to get cut, but I really don't see it happening. It's too much of a key point in forcing Aemond and Criston Cole's hand somewhat at Harrenhal. It kind of impacts quite a few events to come, such as the Butcher's Ball and to some extent Tumbleton. But here's the thing, I don't think we'll get both the Red Fork and the Fishfeed in Season 3. The budget simply won't allow for it, and having both, given how close in time they are, will really cause issues with the pacing, together with the narrative. I suspect what they will do is merge the Red Fork and the Fishfeed into one single battle. I still think they'll have the Lannister army be harassed across the Riverlands, still have them being trapped at the shores of the God's Eye, and have the key figures killed at the Red Fork now killed in the Fishfeed instead. While I would of course miss the Red Fork, I do think merging these two events makes a hell of a lot of sense and doesn't really change the narrative all that much. It would allow for more resources to be put into the Fishfeed, which I hope would mean we see the true horror of the events. I sadly think anything to do with Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken, is likely either going to happen completely off screen or be cut altogether. It doesn't really impact the Dance of the Dragons directly that much, and more so is a setup for the playing board during the Hour of the Wolf and the early years of the Regency, which I sadly think will likely be beyond the scope of House of the Dragon, unless it does become an anthology series. We may, for example, hear of raids on Lannisport by the Ironborn, but I doubt we will see it on screen. And it is kind of a shame, as Lady Joanne Lannister is a really cool character. According to some sources, Joanna donned man's mail to lead the remaining Lannister forces in the struggle to drive the Ironborn from their shores. So she took a really active role in the defense in the west, and even after the Dance of the Dragons would take the fight directly to the Ironborn themselves and lead an attack on Pike. So it's a real shame I don't think we will see her in this capacity on screen. I can maybe see some version of her in Season 4 as a Lannister representation during the Hour of the Wolf, but that is way beyond the scope of this video. There's still part of me that wonders, if they do ever intend to do the Regency stuff on TV, they might still include Dalton Greyjoy, given the role he plays in the story of Alan of Hull post-dance. I guess this is definitely one of the events we will just have to wait and see with. I suspect we will see from set leaks if they do intend to do any of the Red Kraken or Sack of Lannisport, so I will keenly be watching once filming starts in January. Now, it's kind of hard to guess where Season 3 is going to end. I'm going to talk about the Butcher's Ball being in Season 3, as given the timeline of events, it should be. But this is one of those kind of things where it really wouldn't surprise me if they did somehow push it back into Season 4 and put it off for a while. I think it would really be quite compelling if they expanded Criston Cole's doomed march from Harrenhal to the Reach and spent a lot more time with some of the crazy and weird stuff that happens, and all of the well planned out ambushes that they get caught in, like the dead bodies displayed as if they were having a feast. There are just some really cool things they could do with this. It would also fit into the PTSD arc they seem to be building for Criston at the end of Season 2, and I can see the writers developing that even deeper if Gawain is going to stick around for Criston to bounce off. If they do the Butcher's Ball in Season 3, I suspect they might make it much smaller in scale and focus more directly on Kristen's interaction with the Riverlords, rather than the armies as a whole. At the end of the day, Criston Cole is the heart of the Butcher's Ball and will be the narrative focus. I really hope they do stick to the books with it. That section of Fire and Blood has some absolutely killer dialogue. The scenes literally write themselves. I just hope they don't pull any of the history didn't really record what happened stuff, or it was just green propaganda excuses the writers seem to fall back on so much. Season 3 or Season 4, it doesn't matter. I really hope they nail it, as it's one of my favourite parts of the Dance of the Dragons. I suspect the first Battle of Tumbleton might be the final set-piece battle of Season 3. It's big, it's bloody, it has dragons, but also some huge plot twists with the betrayal of the Dragon Seeds. You have this interesting situation with Tumbleton, where you have the Hightower army sieging the town, with the Winter Wolves and Riverlords holding it, and actually then sallying out the back gate to face the Hightowers. It's not really something we've seen on Game of Thrones before, but I think what really stands out to me about the first Tumbleton is the sheer brutality of how it was sacked. We've seen lots of battles in the TV shows, but thus far we've really not seen the horror of a town being utterly destroyed, sacked and ravaged by attacking forces. I guess, yes, you do have Daenerys burning King's Landing in Season 8, but that was sort of out of nowhere, and so poorly handled I couldn't really absorb the horror of it. They had the opportunity to do something really shocking and really powerful with the sack of Tumbleton, and I really hope they don't shy away from really showing the horrors of war. I also have a theory that Otto Hightower will have a much different role in Season 3 than he does in the books. I think he might be taking some of Hobbit Hightower's role in the book and be the man leading the Hightower army. I suspect he could be one of the casualties during the first Tumbleton. If this does come to pass, it's not a book change I really hate the idea of, as long as it is done well. Like I said, it's really hard to guess where Season 3 will end, but I think after the first Battle of Tumbleton is a solid bet. Even merging and changing how events are shown, the pace of Season 3 is going to have to move rapidly, given you still have to include character development and other key narrative points that are not battle scenes. But here's the thing, given the reaction to Season 2, they really need to nail Season 3 from the onset, and honestly, despite some of the issues with the narrative structure, the events the season has to cover really does give them a good shot to do so. What events are you looking forward to in Season 3? Is there anything you're worried about getting cut? Let me know in the comments.